There was once a young craftsman who lived in a bustling village. He worked faster than anyone, his hands never still, his mind never resting. People praised him, "You're so productive." But inside he felt tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that seeps into the heart. One day an old monk visited his workshop. He watched quietly as the young man rushed from one task to another. Finally, the monk said, "The Buddha teaches, to understand everything is to forgive everything." But how can you understand if you never slow down to see? The young craftsman froze, as if he had been running without knowing. That evening the monk sat with him by the fire. The craftsman sighed, "If I slow down, I'll fall behind. I'll lose everything I've worked for." The monk smiled softly. The Buddha reminds us, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. What if your speed is full of hollow moments and your stillness is where real work begins? The young man looked at his hands, rough, tired, always moving. He realized he couldn't remember the last time he sat without fidgeting, without planning the next move. He wondered, what am I really building? The next morning, the monk invited the craftsman for a walk. They moved slowly through the village, past the shops, past the fields. At first, the craftsman felt restless. His feet itched to move faster. His mind raced. So many things left undone, so many tasks waiting. The monk noticed and said, "The Buddha teaches, as a bee gathers honey from the flower without injuring it, so the wise man lives in the world." He smiled. "You don't need to tear through life to taste its sweetness." The craftsman breathed in. For the first time he noticed the warmth of the sun on his skin, the softness of the wind on his face. They reached a quiet stream at the edge of the village. The monk sat on a stone and gestured for the craftsman to join. For a long while they said nothing, just listened to the sound of water flowing, the rustle of leaves, the soft rhythm of the world without interruption. Finally, the monk spoke. "The Buddha says peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." The craftsman closed his eyes. He realized how long he had been searching for peace in finished projects, in praise, in the next achievement, but never in himself. In this stillness, he tasted something rare, a peace not earned, but noticed. That evening, back in his workshop, the craftsman sat alone. He didn't reach for his tools. He didn't rush to finish anything. He just sat. At first, the silence felt heavy, almost uncomfortable. His mind whispered, "You're wasting time. You should be working." But then he remembered the monk's words. He took a slow breath and placed a hand on his chest, feeling his own heartbeat. He realized, all this time he had been building things, but forgetting to build himself. The next day the craftsman met the monk again. He asked, "How do I know if I'm doing enough?" The monk smiled gently. "The Buddha teaches, just as a candle cannot burn without fire, men cannot live without a spiritual life. Your work is not only in your hands, it is in your spirit, in your presence, in your breath." The craftsman stood quietly, feeling the truth settle not in his mind, but in his body. For the first time he understood that slowing down was not losing time. It was finding himself. If this story invites you to slow down and listen, subscribe and tap the bell. Wisdom begins where rushing ends. That evening the craftsman watched the sunset alone. The sky turned soft shades of gold and pink. He had seen hundreds of sunsets before, but never like this. Before, he had always been too busy to notice, too busy to be. He thought of the monk's quiet words, "Slow down, and the world will reveal what it's been whispering all along." He closed his eyes. He realized the wisdom wasn't outside waiting to be chased. It had been here, within him, hidden beneath the noise. The next morning, the craftsman returned to his workshop. He touched his tools gently, feeling their weight, their purpose. But this time, he didn't rush to create. Instead, he moved with care, measuring each motion, breathing between each action. The monk's words echoed in his mind. The Buddha teaches, meditate, live purely, be quiet, do your work with mastery. The craftsman realized it wasn't about abandoning his craft. It was about transforming it from anxious labor into mindful art. As days passed, the village began to notice a change. The craftsman's work became slower but finer, his lines smoother, his details sharper, his pieces alive. People asked, "What's your secret?" He smiled softly. "I slowed down." Some laughed, some didn't understand. But a few leaned in, curious, because they could feel something in his work they hadn't felt before. Presence. The craftsman remembered another teaching. The Buddha says, "A jug fills drop by drop, and so does a life." One evening, the monk visited the craftsman's workshop again. He watched quietly as the young man shaped wood, each movement deliberate, each breath steady. The monk smiled. "You have learned what many never do." The craftsman paused, looking up. "I thought wisdom was about knowing more, but now I see it's about being more." The monk nodded. The Buddha teaches, to conquer oneself is a greater task than conquering others. You have slowed your hands, but more importantly, you have slowed your mind. The craftsman walked the monk to the edge of the village. They stood in the quiet evening, watching the lanterns flicker to life one by one. The craftsman said softly, "I used to believe speed made me strong. Now I understand. Stillness makes me wise." The monk touched his shoulder gently. "Remember," he said, "the Buddha teaches, the way is not in the sky. The way is in the heart." And in that moment, the craftsman felt it, not as an idea, but as a quiet truth. After the monk left, the craftsman stood alone. But this time the silence didn't press on him. It opened around him. He walked slowly back to his workshop, feeling the ground beneath his feet, the air on his skin, the soft rhythm of his own breath. He smiled, not because life had become easier, but because he had learned to meet it more gently. And as he picked up his tools once more, he whispered to himself, "I no longer race through life. I walk with it, slowly, wisely, and fully here."